Oh,
Hello.
that's Vic.
Oh, hello. I just want to be introduced by Nadia.
Hi.
Nadia.
Whee. No, it's okay. You don't have to get up. They're
Okay.
supposed to shoot to me. Okay.
All right.
Good morning, Princeton. Really bright and early. It's 6 o'clock. All right. This is Vic Fedorov, and he's going to talk. And I love his shirt. Just wanted to put that out there. And yeah, go ahead and do your thing.
Okay. Use public TV. I'm in the sky. No, I'm in the sky, and you're in my eye. Why was Nixon a Quaker? That never made much sense to me. They were the most pacifistic people around, and yet he was such a jerk. Anyway, I wanted to start off today by talking about the whole Persian-Greek conflict. Why was Persia interested in Greece? Because for many years, thousands of years, they lived in the desert, and they had a very simple lifestyle. They didn't have much in the variety of food and drink, and they lived that way. And then one year, they discovered the Greeks who had colonized Western Turkey and were on the shores out there, and that's actually where Troy was. And the Greeks developed a slightly inland town called Sardi, and at some point the Persians captured Sardi because Persia united all of Asia, and they discovered the great Greek things, like the perfumes and the wines and the delights, the nice clothes, I guess. I wasn't there then. I get this from a history book. And since then, and then they saw the lifestyle, they got very interested in Greek culture and continually tried to take over Eastern Greece on the western shores of Turkey, which they eventually did. And there's one issue here. The first one is that if people are living in on a desert or in a more barren lifestyle or a more primitive lifestyle, is that supposed to be encouraged? Or are we supposed to say, go for it, develop, refine, rehone this lifestyle that you've had for many years with these values and characterizations? Or should sort of these material comforts and improvement be promoted and assented to? But the reason why the Persians took over Sardi, which made them interested in all of Greece, is that a long time ago, 4 or 5 generations before that happened, and it was Cyrus who did that. And Cyrus was actually raised among the Greeks, legend has it, where by simple shepherds or something, as the story goes, because his body was abandoned because there was some bad prophecy there. And then he ended up over there returning to his natural deposed parents or something out in Persia. But he came over, and how did this happen? Well, the king of Sardi had took over the kingdom from another family, and he told that family, and in those days, if you captured someone, that person was often your top aide or chief of staff. He was like your loyal attendant now. Like you would capture someone, and he practically became your roommate. So this king has his top aide, the king that he took the kingdom from, because they valued each other at that level. And he kept talking, the king did, about how beautiful his wife was, to a point where when his top aide didn't really care, he insisted that he sneak into their bedroom, and catch a glimpse of her, and then when she had turned around and was on her way to bed, escape out the bedroom door. So he was sort of had to do this because he had to very much loyalty to this king that had captured him. But of course, the king's wife, the queen, saw the guy escape out the door. So a few days later, she called him in and said, "You saw me naked. You can either kill yourself, or you can kill the king and marry me." And the guy obviously didn't want to kill the king and marry her because by then they were friends. But at the same time, he couldn't get himself to kill himself. So he killed the king and married the queen. And he was actually a very wise king for it. But he was concerned about the situation, so he went to the Oracle of Delphi. And they said, because of the means for which you got your kingdom, in 4 generations from now, you will lose your kingdom to a great army. And so sure enough, 4 generations from then, his descendant made the mistake of attacking a Persian inland city, and then the Persians came after them and were much better, and once they discovered Sardi and the good things there, they were forever interested in taking over the rest of Turkey, and then several times onward to take over Greece. But if we go by this story and try to interpret the metaphor of it, we see that it was kind of like an objective, observed, detached condemnation by history of the objectification of the women that went on in Western society. So, insofar as wars involve moral justifications, and there's never an excuse for war, that is the way the story is told by Herodotus, who was our first historian proclaiming events way back when. And back then, though, before that, when there was the war with the Trojan War, where they went to war because the one king's wife was stolen, apparently that was like a common event back then. The kings from eastern Greece would steal the queens of the mainland of Greece. The people from the mainland of Greece would steal the princesses of Egypt. The Phoenicians would go as a trading boat to Egypt and then steal these North African queens, and it was all in retaliation to other people having their queens or their daughters stolen. So and that diffused the focus of the people and the media back then from war, and it all became about being very hurt that your wife was stolen. So now you're going to steal one from the people that did it to you. And it was just Agamemnon was actually the first king to be so seriously affronted by that he caused a war. Everyone else who was remarkable for there was never any wars in those periods, according to Herodotus. That was the conflict right then. So when people think that was some sort of like odd occurrence, it was like actually quite a common occurrence. And the wife never came back. The wife was always like part of the harsh part of it was that the wife was always happy in the place that she was captured. So, this world that we live in, to return to modern day America, it's a serious world that we're just not serious about. And the solution is having a free assembly and saying to the free people, well, would you like a simpler economy? Do you think that we should talk about the way we're going on right now? Don't you think that's the most compelling thing? And if the people say yes, that free assembly then compels that sort of discussion. Now, why this doesn't happen is because there really is the kingdom of God. And the difference between me and Christianity is while we both find the terms the kingdom of God and the kingdom of heaven useful, I see that the universe caused the kingdom of God. So for me, there's like a third factor. But bringing up the number of factors, the kingdom of God and the kingdom of heaven, one which is sort of a material, physical part, and the other one which is of a mental part, a mind part that perhaps can extend into the afterlife. This is dualism. This is a break from the monoism and the oneness that was in philosophy before Jesus, where we were all a part of this vast oneness comprised of the physical earth, what consciousness might exist beyond the material world, and the universe. But Jesus chose to divide it up into this kingdom of God and this kingdom of heaven, of the good man in a sinful world, of people trying to do good, but being unable to do good as they really should. and existing in this isolation. But what has to be understood is, I think, is that the kingdom of God is caused by the universe. So when people relate to the kingdom of God, but they don't see this factor of the universe, they don't know what causes the kingdom of God. And that is where to begin the discussion. That is where the trailhead leads to. Because the more we discuss the kingdom of God, the more power we have to implement the political ideals of our Constitution, where there is a reservation of powers to the people, where there is community discussion and the resolution of community problems, and people are proactive about their school and their economy and the way things are, and they're talking about what we should do with our time and life. This is all, when you take that essential basic political desire or political equation, and you take the center of gravity of religion and spirituality, and that obviously you can't explain the lack of sense in this world through apathy. It's obviously a larger mind controlling smaller minds so that a more peaceful, harmonious, and rich society does not happen. So when you try to achieve or prosecute for those ideals and those goals of a better society and a better world, and you see how hard it is and how it's not happening, you have to include the variable or the constant of some spiritual understandings, something that makes the world different than the way the media is. And that's where there is a direct contradiction. There's a direct contradiction between what the print media or the New York Times reports as truth and what religion or spirituality is dealing with or calling truth. So this contradiction between what the church calls service and what the newspapers call truth indicates a great expenditure of energy on the part of the kingdom of heaven towards promoting the kingdom of God as the world of man. And it's this promotion that's also we start from to deal with with what causes the kingdom of God. Can we come together to do something about that? Can we make something of this effort to actually start with something truthful and spiritual and real, and from there start a whole new great world? I mean, right now the conundrum is that local officials cannot discuss the issue of how local government is done because, according to New Jersey ethics law, if you have a personal or financial interest in a decision, you can't discuss that issue. And they have a personal and financial issue in local office being seen as consistent with the 10th Amendment and free assembly, which it's not, because local officials are not the state or the power which the 10th Amendment reserves powers to. So you can only get at these conundrums through the deeper ballast and weight of spirituality and religious concerns, whatever they are. By means, all religions are many different paths to the truth, and you need many different paths to the truth in case one path or two is not going to make it. You got more good people trying to get up their paths there. So if anything, you want religion to be more diverse, to be more individual, more frail, more idiosyncratic or individual. And but as people understand it, within the dualism of ourselves right here, there is the kingdom of heaven that's listening to this as well. But there is the understanding of the morality, the moral law of discussing the kingdom of God. So in between that, we come to where we are right now. Let me just give you what the story of Adam and Eve represents. Adam and Eve stands for evolution. We started off as animals, and we evolved into humans. And at some point, we got the sense that something bad was happening to our planet. It was being taken over by the universe. There was a kingdom of God being created through something. I mean, and there are many Earths out there in the universe. All it takes is being a certain ratio, a rock with a ratio to the sun. There are Earth-like planets all over the universe, I believe, and I believe it's prime real estate. even to a point of causing jealousy in lower orders of the universe. And so as we evolved, the Old Testament story of Adam and Eve is about how you evolve through knowledge. You figure something out. You learn how to use your hands, and then you're able to become greater. You notice this, and you observe that. So you respond this way, which makes you more talented in being able to do this and that. So, but as you evolve through knowledge, you also became more an object of jealousy, to be something to be jealous of by the rest of the universe. And that threat, or reality, is why the Lord forbid Adam and Eve from eating of the tree of knowledge, because they represented simple, innocent animals that he did not want to evolve into something that would cause jealousy from the other consciousnesses in the universe. The Talmud says that, we can only sense what our senses can sense. There can be other things that are sensed by other types of senses that we don't have the natural innate ability to deal with. So thank you very much. I'll call in Pamela here. I'll have a quick little humorous guest here. I shouldn't be moving my chair. I hope I meant to sound a little bit comic, but boom. This never happened to Frank Sinatra. Okay. All right, Pamela.
Victor, what about the queendom? What about the queendom?
Well, the queendom, yes.
Are we on? Okay. Because if you're talking about objectification of women in history, and your story does seem to indicate that really the woman was sort of the manipulator behind that whole scenario in Persia, and I don't think that's fair. There's always two sides to a story. And I'd like to hear what you have to say about the queendom.
Yes. The kingdom of God is a very patriarchal term that has served us to no good, and we should now call it the what is it called? The queendom of goddess. Okay? Because, what has the patriarchy done for you lately?
Exactly.
And then you also had something, you objected to the term the kingdom of heaven. There was something wrong with Jesus' propositions there.
Well, first of all, kingdom. Why not queendom of heaven? Why not spiritual reality of heaven?
Yes, you expect the kingdom of heaven to now be called the reality of heaven.
Yes, I think that would be fair.
So we're just going to make a note to everyone putting out a Bible these days to just amend those terms the same way you have a right to amend your Constitution.
That's right.
So, Pamela, why is it that you don't know the 10th Amendment or never learned that the reservation of powers for the state or the people precludes local officials?
I think I was playing hooky that day.
Do you really think your other classmates learned that?
Yes. I do know the 10th Amendment. I just don't know it all by heart. And, however, there are aspects of it that I have recently learned thanks to you. And I do think it is very important that people put this Constitution, as part of our Constitution, into motion, into effect. We could really have a much better community, and our right to free speech is so important.
That's right. Teachers out there, please teach the 10th Amendment reservation of powers to the state or the people to your students. And please teach them that free assembly means gathering the town together to ask the town to make a decision on something. And please teach them that the right to petition the government to redress grievance means that any one of them can ask a judge a question where they think they've been hurt and they deserve something for it.
And you don't have to have an attorney to do that. You have the right to do it yourself.
Yes. If you ever fill out a case for the Supreme Court, which is like a form or a packet, they ask you what gives you the right to ask the Supreme Court a question. And, well, it's the right to petition the government to redress grievance. It's a First Amendment right. And in some ways, all those circuit courts and district courts are just mere clerks to this, compared to the majesty of the Great Nine.
However, still, I would need to say that it's also part of our responsibility as citizens that if you don't say something, nothing's going to change. And remember, Margaret Mead said, never forget that a small group of committed individuals or thoughtful committed individuals can change a world. Indeed, it's the
Right.
only
But, Pamela, haven't I been reviewing how the queendom of goddess has a natural inhibiting factor upon progressive and powerful politics?
Not necessarily.
I mean, you can't go around believing in this illusion that the people can do something. I think I just said it's not that the people are apathetic or need to be inspired, it's that the people's mind is controlled by a larger, more powerful mind. They can't speak.
Are you speaking in terms of the conscious and unconscious components of people? Is this...
Exactly.
That's what you was. So if we bring it down to just average terms, you would say there's the unconscious, and if you're not aware of the unconscious, it does have a tendency to influence you.
Pamela, didn't I just say that the media is like representing a world in contradiction with what religion is providing
But
and
down on
calls...
Channel 30, that's why everybody needs to support Channel 30 and become members and send in your donations. This is very important. This is a lovely station.
I'm not sure if this is a fundraiser, but Channel 30, it compels us to consider what we can use TV for to make our community better. It also provides the opportunity for your creative and artistic expression. My idea is that if we broke up the networks into, and made a law that each state had 3 networks, and the shows in New Jersey had to be about New Jersey, and the shows in Michigan had to be about Michigan, and the movies in Michigan had to be set in Michigan, and the movies that they show in Wyoming had to be set in Wyoming, not only would you like increase the number of acting jobs out there by 50, but I think you'd have a much more relatable and classical form of entertainment. And at community TV, where you're literally performing for your neighbors, there's a real opportunity for a development of creativity that you don't see in other places. And I know the kingdom of heaven, or the queendom of the reality of heaven, has to smile upon us to make people. But we're putting that prayer out there. And let's see, what else? Oh, agriculture. Okay, this is an interesting story. I didn't like the way they were building all these houses and suburbs all over New Jersey, and malls and huge stores. And they don't do that in New England because it requires 240 people and to make those decisions. And so I ran for office on a free assembly platform against that locally, but then I found that it was illegal because of the 10th Amendment, and then the judge really dished my case. And so I know that the people, Nadia, would want a more agrarian society, and that if my case had won and we would have had free assembly, we'd be in an agrarian New Jersey state right now. I'm sure everyone's for it. The democracy has to ask the people. And so I went out there and I became an organic grower, so that I'm a few steps ahead of everyone.
With sort of like against the food industry complex?
No. I have nothing but respect for anyone who produces food.
Okay. No, but I meant the industrial complex of food. The
Oh,
production.
yeah. I mean, I think the most important thing is producing food for ourselves. That would be, if we ever had a free assembly, we would talk about, let's be self-sustaining, let's focus on the food. And if we all focus on the food, we would have more time, because there's things that we don't need to focus on.
Local growing.
Mm-hmm.
I hope everyone's having a garden in Princeton. I know out in Long Valley where the farm is, they're all got gardens.
It
They
is the
try to-
Garden State, so.
You've
right?
got to have a garden, even if it's a tomato in your windowsill or some spices over the sink.
What do I have in my windowsill? Well, my parents plant gardens. It's like a very like South Asian thing. My parents are from Bangladesh. They like growing stuff in the yard. That's
Yeah.
cool.
It's
No.
primal. It's you. You know, you are what you eat.
Yeah, I'm like, I was just saying, I was reading, like, what is that, The Omnivore's Dilemma, actually. I don't know if you know that book.
Are you a vegetarian?
Semi.
Respect
Meaning-
for animals.
Yeah, respect for animals and also, like, not wanting to eat feces. But anyway,
There you
it
go.
just, but it's, I'm reading this book. I don't know if you know it. It seems like it's going along with a lot of the food part that you're talking about. And it was interesting. I mean, it's stuff I knew, about the food production and artificial this, artificial that, lots of corn everywhere,
And what was the omnivore the dilemma?
I think the omnivore's dilemma is like before you would have so much choice as an omnivore in the wild between what was edible. Like we couldn't eat grass because we can't digest that, but we could eat fruit. We liked fruit because they gave us energy, and our dilemma was a little more simpler. It was just more about picking and choosing the energy that worked for us to survive. But now we have a different dilemma, which is we walk into a store and we have thousands of products, and we don't even know what's in it, and we don't even know what xanthan gum is. So
And people eat it, but they don't help produce it.
No, they have nothing to do with producing it. But you know, I mean, according to this, it's not even according to this book. I think it's pretty much people know this. It's petroleum and corn that helps to produce it.
Right.
So,
Another aspect to fuel the corn now. And also what's interesting is a lot of school children around the country, and you know this, they have no idea where food actually comes from. They have never had their hands in the earth, and I find that amazing.
Well, now, let's not be judgmental
Oh, well.
and understand the sin of the world.
yeah. Well, you know, I mean, there's an interesting quote I remember. Actually, I underlined. I thought it was interesting because they said that you know, the government, I mean, they're spending all this money on obesity, right? Obesity and health problems, like, let's combat obesity, let's sign legislation about it, but no one's actually signing any legislation about, you know, decreasing the amount of corn or the amount of production or changing the production values and methods that are actually causing all this. So again, it's sort of like trying to stop a Band-Aid when you're already fat and having diabetes, so.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, free assemblies offer
No
a
offense to fat
chance
people.
for real reform.
Well, I really understand what you're saying, and I can see where your free assembly platform can really be a vehicle for this particular concern of hers. That would be something to take up, just how, without eating proper food, we're creating all these secondary chronic conditions that could very well have been prevented had we made it a really important priority to teach children from the very beginning about whole food and nutrition.
You're saying, okay, the question about free assembly is that, you know, if people maybe, like it's almost like, what is it, like The Matrix or 1984, if you look at a very nightmarish sort of example of people who are just sort of lulled into this sort of sense of normalcy and okayness with what's going on. You don't question because it's really, it's seen as like you're a hippie or you're abnormal or something like that if you really care about all this stuff, or you're elitist. So you're saying free assembly is it's like by the people to come together. But what if the people themselves are lulled into this sort of sleep of acceptance? How do they come out of that? How do you educate them? And where does the movement start for everybody, not just a
Okay.
select few?
Complacency.
I don't want to, I know the answer, this is my expertise. But,
Oh,
in the ancient days, they had this, where classical towns had the same concerns you do, and what they would do is it would be enforced. I mean, I don't want to like sound like a fascist or something, but in some ways, the police would be out there on free assembly nights, just making sure that there were at least 500 or 1,000 people in the town square to make these decisions. So that's number one. It can be enforced because apathy, as I've alluded to in this show, is a chronic problem.
I mean, where was that at? You said with the police enforcing the free assembly.
In classical times, soldiers,
You mean classical meaning Roman time?
in Roman times and Greek times, where
Okay.
free assemblies were
Uh-huh.
practiced, it was enforced.
Okay.
It was against the law to like not go to one or be seen not going to one. You know, it was like a respectful, somber time.
So I mean, no, I mean, I'm just questioning that. I mean, not questioning. I meaning like I'm trying to sort of wrap my head around the idea of free assembly with police enforcement. I mean, is that free then? I mean, what if the police are sort of like, no, there needs to be 1,000 people here, because it seems like it's productive, right? Because you're getting people to come in and be together and.
Machiavelli says the good laws, the good habits of good people require good laws. So Nadia, what's wrong with creating a law to encourage good behavior?
No, I mean, there's no laws. Like any law can be encouraged to put towards
It's
good
like
behavior.
a positive law. Like in some ways, school is intended as a positive law.
Yeah.
It's a law that you go to school, but it's meant to help you.
Yeah.
There's a law that you should go to free assembly, but it's meant to help you.
Yeah.
The idea is that once we move to a free assembly form of local government, the polity gets activated, and it takes off, and it becomes a very dynamic, exciting thing. But you see, my big question for those of you visiting people from Princeton, from New England, my big question for people from New England, where there are town meetings, where there are 240 people make a decision, how come you don't discuss the economy? How come you all don't come together and say, well, you know, not everything I do is absolutely necessary, or, you know, maybe we could just focus on what's really important and then have more time, or why don't we have more meals together, or, you know, there's so much isolation in the world. The isolation is a sin too. That's community is so important, and also I'm saying likewise with school. I always found school to be very regulative and oppressive, because I think that when you tell someone what to do, you know, from 8 to 3, you go to school for 10 years. then for the rest of his life, from 8 to 3, he's not necessarily going to know what to do to enjoy himself.
Yeah, it's you have to have that. No, and I agree with you. It's sort of like this the structure set up to sort of, how do you say, like herd people, basically, right? It's to schedule
Well-
them and indoctrinate them in some kind of, and you said from like the early age from school.
But this is not to say everyone involved is not a talented, skilled person. I mean, it's a lot of effort to survive in the world today. I mean, we all know that. I mean, I have the tremendous respect for everyone living this way, so to speak. I mean, you know, there is a world of illusion and there is a world of reality, but there's a lot of highly competent people with character out there. That's what makes the whole lack of, you know, natural genuflection, you know, the absence, as they say, so much more there to discuss. The thing about, I just want to make a point about agriculture.
Okay.
The reason, Nadia, why do we use chemicals to keep down the weeds?
We use chemicals to keep down the weeds, so we could you know, sort of control nature and plant other stuff.
Up to like 100 years ago, 70% of New Jersey was in agriculture. And there was such a workforce that there was enough people in agriculture to do the weeding. But then they got subsumed by the business movement of New York City. And as soon as, you know, 70% of the people start going to New York every day, there's no one left to do the weeding. So you develop, you know, a reliance on technology develops these chemicals, and then lo and behold, you save millions of man hours by using chemicals to keep down the weeds. Now, I don't do that. You know, just because, you know, I'm out there weeding, I can't imagine having a chemical out there near the soil in my hands. But I certainly, you know, you can't just like blame conventional farmers. You have to blame our society that has totally relocated the majority agrarian workplace into a majority business workplace, and that's been without discussion. You know, democracy has to ask the people what they want. And engage them, and so there's just such a fundamental shift, as if everything's like you said.
Well, do you think it's sort of like, how do you say, like hyper-capitalism in a way? Like, I mean, just like, you know, the more bang for your buck, and more efficiency, more money, and cheaper commodity, you know, just to sell more and gain as much as possible, as quick as possible. And does it sort of seem like capitalism run amok without regard, really, to people or to the public? It's more about
irresponsibility, perhaps. But I think, see, I can never understand how these conservatives, they say, oh, we're capitalism and we're religion and Christianity. Well, to me, capitalism and Christianity are totally opposite sides of the spectrum. They're totally, you know, Christianity is saying we should be kind to each other and end the sin of our isolation and be good and, you know, live as we really should. And capitalism, it totally takes out the variable of the kingdom of God from the equation. So instead of dealing with this great truth to create a wiser economy, capitalism obscures a great truth and comes up with an economy that's almost defined by weird, out of the way. You know what I mean? It's kind of like many fast interconnecting links everywhere.
invisible hands.
I mean, an economy by definition is a complexity. It's a complex system. It's not a simple system. That's how our economy is looked at. It's like, well, if you can work within the complexity and make it even more complex, but don't try to simplify it.
What I hear you saying, and if you could flesh this out a little bit, it would seem to me that capitalism, to many people, equals democracy. And somehow that equation seems really messed up. And you can see how in America, we're pioneers, we got there, we built businesses, we have to be for ourselves, we must have some kind of, you know, economic agenda, right? But that is not democracy. And when people lose their sense of being a citizen and realizing 7 generations down the road, that's going to make a big difference to the planet or to the people. That's why you don't use chemicals in your farm.
Yeah, I don't see how you can be a capitalist and a Christian. I mean, in some way, I am a capitalist. I am a small businessman operating a small organic farm where I need volunteers, and it's a great experience. A total body workout, only $10.
1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 1, 5, 4.
Plug for volunteers. You want to work on a farm? Let's go.
Yeah, it's just like playing as a kid. It's better than hiking.
It's beautiful
So,
there, too.
I'm sorry, reference me?
Oh,
Oh
So
yeah,
capitalism
I don't
and
see
being
how
not
like
being Christian.
right. I don't see how I don't see how Christian and capitalism go together. I mean, but I am a small businessman. But I believe ultimately small business is based on Christian understandings. It's just for me as a small businessman being able to get to those get to those understandings and use those understandings to transform, inject a certain ease in my business that I believe other small businessmen have. So certainly as a very small businessman, I rely on Christian terminology for a certain faith.
But isn't a lot of this, I mean, even like economics or Christianity or religion, one thing I think that is sort of the monkey wrench here is the fact that a lot of it is really theory, or we're talking about things as they're supposed to be, and not how as they are. So, but like for an example, like you said, like that maybe fundamentally Christianity and capitalism can't be the same thing, but in reality, I mean, when we look at these fundamental evangelical Christians, the one who were obviously the big pushers of the Bush administration when it was at its peak, they're like, well, we're capitalists, is God's will, and all these things, and you don't love thy brother. You only love thy brother if he's an evangelical Christian and he's not gay and he's not brown skin, or he's not Muslim or Jewish or anything like that. And the same thing with capitalism itself, even communism. I mean, in practice it's one thing, but when you put it to the people, individuals who might take power, individuals with their own personalities, whatever factors of reality, doesn't it obscure it and take it from not being theory and just being something different in reality?
See, the idea of our constitutional democracy is that this is not the final stage of our democracy. Democracy gives us the tools to continue evolving and adapting to make itself better. And I believe democracy is fundamentally based on the people coming together at a local level and having their free assemblies and discussion protected. A lot of towns, I try to organize free assemblies across New Jersey, and a lot of towns limit the use of the community rooms to local residents or nonprofits, and that's a total infringement upon the right to organize free assemblies, and a violation of the 14th Amendment, because it's making and enforcing a law that abridges a privilege granted in the Constitution. And I've been trying to talk to the Division of Civil Rights in the Attorney General's office in New Jersey, because they have a code as to what qualifies as a civil right violation. If someone's mean to you because you're handicapped, or orientation, or minority status. But even though those basic rights and understandings for all people are encompass the understanding that free assembly is for all people. For some reason, because free assembly has not been singled out or even considered as a viable means or alternative, we really are in like a civil rights movement where there's something vastly wrong, and no one's even aware that there's something vastly wrong.
Well, what do you think about, something a little more extreme than just assembling, like things like protests, major protests? I mean, I have some friends who are, part of the anti-war movement, they go out with the signs and everything like that, and, there's always severe, police barricades, and supposed to a place that is a public space, so there's limits. Oh, you can't have this many people, or you went to this property, we can gas you now. I mean, what do you think about even something like a strike or a protest, which you could say is our right to assemble, and that always gets shot down? Almost always, I guess.
This is something I touched on in the Constitution, which is that I believe all these people should take their grievances to court. And the form our Constitution offers to aggrieved people is to bring it up before judges, try to discuss it in the sobriety of the courtroom, try to bring it out to the public through the legal system. I mean, there are three ways you can change things in America: through the executive, through the legislative, or through the judicial. Now, the executive depends upon the whims of one president. The legislative can take years before you muster up enough support for some new idea. But the judicial route, if a judge sees, that, hey, this is a law, the 10th Amendment, it makes local officials illegal, they issue a court order restoring free assemblies as a form of local municipal government in towns throughout New Jersey, with large quorums required. That's instant change through the judiciary. So in some ways, the judiciary is a way greater superpower than the legislature.
But do you think, instant change to the judiciary, do you think that's actually realistic? I mean, in
Completely.
practice?
That's been happened before. They say, okay, your toxic waste dump, violates civil rights to health. Boom, you got to clean that up. Or, you can't, you are allowed to monitor keep your beach closed at night. That's the judge decides these issues. They decide issues of law all the time. If something is wrong, or if the blacks are not being allowed to vote, the Warren court says, boom, we gotta change that system. Allow voting, encourage voting.
But then that's not an instantaneous thing, like you just said, with blacks being allowed to vote. It's not, one county was like, oh, this is wrong. I mean, this was a national movement that took years and maybe even, decades and maybe centuries
But
to
ultimately, it was
overturn.
decided by the judiciary.
Well, yeah, ultimately, but I'm saying is like, obviously there was an entire sort of back process of, activists
Right.
and people and politicians slowly changing the tide of things. And I mean, like personally, I do legal work. I'm not a lawyer, but I do legal work with women in the state. I do a lot of things with like immigration and family law, but I am versed in other, basically dealing with courts and the system. And, there are things that can happen, but honestly, when it comes to certain injustices or to get something across, it isn't instantaneous. It is like an uphill struggle, and eventually, if it gains enough momentum, it does change.
It is a conundrum. And to me, if I can offer as the fulcrum, the queendom of goddess, as she calls it, that's the fulcrum. That's Archimedes' lever. And then, because I actually do not think that, yes, I believe you should not do what you're told, okay? And you have a right to sit down when they say stand up, or stand up when they say sit down. But in terms of going around protesting, to me, change is about calm, spiritual conversation with the people and trying to show state officials, the way nature really is these days. Or it's about, some, legal recourse or within the confines of legal understandings, or through organizing free assemblies and just seeing how many people show up until we start to rival local officials.
I could just add one thing here. No cliche, but you can get more flies with honey than you can with vinegar. And so, really, the system is there for everyone. It's not just for the elite and powerful, it's for everybody. And people organize and actually put that into action. If they want to protest, that's great too. But the real concrete grassroots lobbying really does make the difference. And that's very important. And
See, what they did in ancient Rome, because they had wars all the time and they protested the wars, is the actual soldiers went on strike. And they started to lose a couple battles on purpose. And they said, we are not going to fight anymore until we get special captains who are in charge of making sure the politicians and people in power, are not abusive to us.
My friend actually emailed me drunk and asked if that was Robin. She's like, who's that Robin like dude? And then she wrote some random letters, and then she's like, are you going to be Batman? I'm like, no, not really. Sorry.
That's the captain.
It is, but I explained that to her in a later email. No, I don't know if that was a cue. Was that a cue for that we're running out of time? Oh, so he just came to flop his wings. Okay.
Victor, could you speak a little bit about the free assembly that you had at the Princeton Public Library? And before, I'd like to just preface that by saying, this is very funny. We should have brought the forum his poster for it. He had to put a disclaimer saying,
Oh, I wouldn't. I know we're not.
Okay.
We're going to censorship.
Okay.
But the point is at the library to use first of all getting a community room for a free assembly in this town. I wonder if Rodney Dangerfield ever did that, because it is a step above the normal use to a degree where it's protected by the Constitution, and people really aren't used to that. Churches and such, and the community room at the library where we had a free assembly. But you see, only 12 people showed up, like you said, because how do you make people show up to these? And I didn't quite understand that you're supposed to ask the people questions to see what their ideas are.
Well, what about like how do you combat like this overwhelming sense of like apathy? I mean, okay, with even like national elections, America. I mean, the Obama election was sort of unprecedented in a lot of ways, with the voter turnout and support. But even before that, you just heard it year after year was this sort of this sort of anger. How much time do we have left? I actually don't know. Oh, okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure. But this like there's a huge sense of apathy for something as large as a presidential election. So how do we just snap people out of the sense of apathy in general?
Well, you see, again, I mean, to me, it's not apathy. It's the kingdom of God. The people can't speak. So that puts voting, for representative officials at a federal and state level. That puts the economy. That puts war. That kind of spiritual understanding, and it can be gotten through many religions. The meditation of Buddhism, the pantheon of Hinduism. It all implies the kingdom of God. It just has their own cultural paths to those understandings, and reckonings. So to me, there's just far more truth in spirituality than there is in this kind of like constructed world that we're dealing with.
But do you think most people would see that? I mean, you see that, or maybe other people can understand that. But I mean, like saying that is an abstract idea. I mean, would that be even applicable to the general public?
I mean, I think as the kingdom of God is more and more revealed, or people are discussing or getting into the ramifications of this, and we're picking up those conversational threads that really get into the dualism between the heavenly part and the physical part, and we look for leverage there. And just to me, it's a lot of talking at some point, or it also requires meditation. You see, that's another thing. I kind of have like a little bit of an Asian view of things, and that I believe, meditating, turning inward, actually can do something, and that in some ways it's your own mind that unlocks good things happening, and not any sort of activism. But now it's very frustrating how things don't change, and we're occupying another country.
2 countries.
And this is just, I mean, this obviously is not, high class living, so to speak. But I don't know what to say to that other than we're all going through this kind of oppressive or suppressive age together. There has to be a translation of this.
So when you speak of the kingdom of God, I mean, obviously when you hear it just in its context of that, it just sounds like, like a holy Christian ideal. Do you mean it more like because I'm trying to understand for myself. Again, because unfortunately, I missed some of your conversation.
Do you have spiritual tenets or ways of understanding the world, either unique to you or within a broad framework?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody does in some ways to like make sense of reality, spirituality, or even religion, and people use that in different ways, or they deny it. And even that itself is a use of some sort.
I mean, you seem to be like a very compassionate person. Where did you learn that compassion? Was it always there?
I mean, my particular thing is that I think I learned from my parents. I think there was from an early get-go, compassion was very much taught to me through action, through words, and through how my parents taught me to treat other people. I really think that I specifically remember from age 4, like incidents of compassion being taught to me.
And compassion very much involves, a lack of illusion. The reality itself. Is all within compassion. There's a lot of reality in compassion. There's a lot more. You learn more from tragedy than you do from comedy. So in some ways, this tragedy that we're living in has to be learned from, and has to, one day be turned. All I can say is that's what faith is about. There is the second half. We'll get a chance to throw some touchdowns, and I'll try to fall down before I'm tackled.
Well, I think it's interesting also. I mean, speaking about tragedy and comedy in the current era, I mean, especially with this economic downturn, I mean, that is really where you saw like a public uproar against bonuses and, money and the upper class and all these things. And what is your take on this? I mean, it seems like the public's upset. They're upset this is all happening, and but you don't really see. I mean, you're seeing some persecution sort of thing, but not from the public really. They're just pissed.
I think there's mind control.
And in what ways?
There's just a greater mind from, I think it's very logical that sometime people figured out how to extend existence after death, and that must be a very powerful, profound force capable of controlling the minds of society, because it's a metaphysical situation. That's another thing I wanted to touch on, metaphysics. You see, it's a metaphysical equation, and you just can't do much about a metaphysical equation, you know. You know, if all I can say is that, you know, if you're oppressed by the world, you know, live healthy, bond with people, read books, you know, eat right, exercise, be kind to your parents, like
Do
senior
art.
citizens, do art,
Do art.
right? You know, come up
Art to
with
me is the
stu-
ultimate form of protest. You know, you kill art in a society. That's one of the first things to go, right?
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, look at every totalitarian regime. When the first, I mean, whenever any takeovers, the art, when the art gets flung out the windows, that's when you see that's major trouble coming along.
That's a good point, because artists often portend where society's going. I mean, physics, everything, there's always a correlation there. So it's very true.
Yeah. So I mean, you're talking about the, I mean, I'm, you know, it's a little late and everything like that. So I'm hoping, trying to wrap my head around this. I mean, I know somewhat some things about metaphysics. Actually, what is
oh,
that?
look at this, what I have.
What is this called? The
I
gospel?
have,
The
this is
gospel?
good. This, props to Vic.
Gospel of Thomas.
This is the Gospel of Thomas, just given me today by two people that have volunteered their time to help me on the farm tomorrow. They brought me a book, and it's so this one says you see, apparently there were auditions for the Gospels, for the 4 Gospels, and they actually considered 11 of them, and those were the 4 they picked. I don't know how true that story is, but if you Google other Gospels, you'll see there are a bunch of them.
The Gospel of Mary
And
as
this,
well.
and this is the Gospel of Thomas, and it says, Jesus said, "Woe to the flesh dependent upon the soul, woe to the soul dependent upon the flesh." And that means exactly that the heavenly part of you, you know, you have to understand your limitations. If you cannot make the flesh do what you want to do to make a better world. So woe to the mind that cannot let go of the, you know, that wants so badly to do good and is frustrated. And you know, as the physical incarnation of Nadia, enjoying being Nadia, you know, woe to her, you know, that wants too badly the, you know, the link to heaven. So that's one of them. That was 112. And then, okay, they asked him, "When is the kingdom coming?" He replied, "It is not coming in an easily observable manner. People will not be saying, 'Look, it's over here,' or 'Look, it's over there.' Rather, the kingdom of God is already spread out on the earth, and people aren't aware of it."
Almost seems like Nirvana. No, I mean,
How
as
so?
in like Nirvana's always there. It's just about, you know, reaching it.
And it's true, people are not aware of the kingdom of God, or it's far away from us, because I think there is mind control that keeps us from
So do
apprehending
you mean like
that.
a mind control, like individuals, or is it like sort of like a metaphysical zombie? I mean, it feels like, you know, it's almost like this Big Brother zombie that's like somehow.
No, I mean, like, there really could be life after death. That's a huge, powerful mind. And it might not want the mind of the people, or the mind of the officials, or the mind of media to communicate the necessary things that it takes to
So you mean
amend
like,
this
let's
world.
say like a depressive person in life would
It's
be
a
an oppressive
metaphysical,
person. Okay.
it's a metaphysical situation where, like, you know, and it's happening across the world. I don't think there are really many cultures that are having a good time today, or are being the way they should be. These are no longer the classical days. So,
Well, not everything was so great in the classical days either. I mean,
well, yes, there are always
there was
bad
the Hun
things.
invasion.
Right.
What I think is actually very important is that you're speaking of the various Gospels from the original Gnostic Gospels, I believe, that Elaine Pagels here in Princeton has done so much research and writing on. And there are Gospels of Mary and Gospels of very strong females that have not been included in the Bible. So when we talk about the kingdom or of God, or the reality of heaven, or the way of the goddess, I think it's very mindful to realize what we're missing is the feminine element.
That's like the Da Vinci
And
Code,
that's
actually.
like where the void is.
It's
That's
true.
why we're here.
There is the male, the yin yang is a little bit mind, you know, and it has to be worked. And that's another way. There's also the ideality that a man and women working together, you know, as the yin and the yang, can solve and achieve things. And that's another personal way of achieving, you know, a greater society. But Jesus said, "Whoever has found the world and become rich should renounce the world." That means that when we do achieve a viable salvation through talking with each other, and we are able to do what we couldn't, you know, and we are aware of a greater reality, and other people are involved, and there is some sort of positive order of democracy coming out of it. then we will become rich that way, and we will renounce the world which we came from. The world of sin from which we came from is renounced by those who attain riches, of the true world.
Okay. Actually, I've gotten a signal to.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it's about.
Oh, can I just say one last thing?
Sure.
When you do forums on the internet, please just give your real name, because without reputation, it's possible to be altered into forms without any check upon you, because you're not risking anything. So just
His blog, West Windsor. What did you give them?
that's okay.
Okay.
But that's all. I just want to make an appeal for people to use real names instead of
Yeah.
acronyms.
Can you put your email address and your
No,
phone
I'm
number?
okay.
Oh yeah. So don't be hiding behind masks and stuff. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I am staying on. All right. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for
thank you.
speaking.
Bless
Keeping
y'all.
up the energy. Take care.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,